Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome at this very late sitting, and to those that were in the NA budget seating, welcome to you as well. I see our MK member is very well dressed today, Honourable Makuna. You do look very smart. I would like to bring something to your attention with regard to Mardia. If we go on, our secretary, after 7, it's Ramadan, and she needs to break her fast, and I see there's a lady over there as well that will have to also be excused. So I'm informing you, if Mardia does get up, please know why she's getting up, and then Beverly, will she take over for the minutes? Okay, Bev, thank you very much. If we can just go through the formalities. Welcome and apologies. Mardia, from your side, any apologies?
Chair, there's only one apology from Honourable Dlankisa Nododa.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister, from your side, any apologies from your department?
Thanks very much, Chair. From our side, the apologies from the Chair of the SABC, but he'll be represented by the Deputy Chair of the SABC. And the DM would plead that we release him at 5 o'clock. He's just returned from an international trip and he wasn't supposed to be here, but he's here at least for an hour. Thank you.
DM, thank you for gracing us with your presence. I know you haven't slept very well, and I don't think the budget did much for you to stay awake. Before we start, colleagues, we've been presented with a new presentation. It was submitted to us at 2 o'clock. That's why we've only just given it out. And Minister, if I can ask you, or somebody from your department, just to indicate to us which pages were altered so that we can just have a look on our old presentation where the changes are. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. And apologies about that. It was simply to strengthen the presentation with additional information that the team thought would be useful ahead of the department. So it wasn't to change the presentation substantially, but the addition of 2 more slides. The Group CEO from the SABC, Nomsa, who's on my right, will be able to confirm which pages are those in terms of the presentation that you have. Thank you.
If I could ask, when we go through, you just indicate to the members which pages have been altered. All right, before we cross over to the Minister and his department, could I have an adoption for the agenda, please? Thank you very much. Can I just, could you put your mic on just for minute purposes?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to submit for the adoption of the budget, budget. That's me being fired.
It's true.
No, of the agenda, excuse me.
We'll excuse her this time round. And a seconder, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I will second the proposal to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. And with no further ado, over to you, Minister.
Thanks very much, Chair, and greetings to the members of the Select Committee. It's a pleasure for us as the department, together with the SABC, to be able to meet with your portfolio committee to present to you on the request that you made for the SABC to present on its financial sustainability. So we are joined, as I did indicate earlier, by the Deputy Chairperson of the SABC board, who's Nomvoiso Baji. I'll ask her to raise her hand so that you can see here. We're also joined by the Group CEO of the SABC, Nomsa Chabeli, and also Mr. Tendai Matore, who's the acting CFO from the SABC. From the department, we're joined by the Director General, Ms. Nonkubela Jordan Jani. We also have the Deputy Minister and also Mr. Colin Mashile, who's the DDG, is it DDG, right? Chief Director. Chief Director in the department responsible for all matters of broadcasting and particularly issues with the SABC. Chair, the approach we're taking with the presentation is that the SABC will spend most of the time dealing with the substance of the question that you had asked in order to get a view of the SABC's challenges that they are facing, the progress that the SABC is making with regards to the turnaround strategy towards financial sustainability and viability of the SABC. But just as a start, I thought it's important to recognize the strides that have been made by, the SABC, particularly with regard to governance, leadership stability, both at an executive level and also I think at the board level, but also in terms of audit outcomes, and that many of you who had followed the developments around the SABC in the previous years would acknowledge that it has weathered very difficult storms for it to be able to get to the type of environment that it is in. And it is through the leadership that is there currently that we are starting to see some of the restoration of the focus on good governance, on the operational efficiency, and also on making the public broadcaster fulfill its key role in providing the entertainment, the education and informative aspect to the public. That, Chair, is on the positive side. On the more pragmatic side is the challenge that faces the SABC regarding issues of sustainable funding, which are applicable across a lot of state entities, particularly with the state of our fiscus and the limited resources that we are facing, but also with the evolution of developments in broadcasting media, audiovisual media across the board, and they'll be able to get into some of the plans that they are embarking on or interventions to mitigate that impact, because they need still to remain competitive in being a platform that provides audiences with the type of content that keeps eyes on the screens. It will also be remiss of us not to highlight major developments around the analog switch off, particularly given that the end of March would mark the deadline for analog switch off in South Africa to be completed. Members of the committee would be aware that there is litigation currently underway, and I think the matter is set between the 18th and the 19th, initiated by E-Media as one of the broadcasters with regards to government's decision to proceed with analog switch off. The SABC, of course, would be able to outline some of their views on that, but from us, the reality is the matter has been long-standing for some time, and it comes down to the simple matter of the affordability of dual elimination, which is the requirement to keep both digital and analog signal at the same time. And with the state shrinking passes, it's increasingly becoming unaffordable for the state to do so. And that is the prism within which even the decision to seek that extension, which was granted from 2024 December to the end of March, was seen in, and we had embarked on an effort to try and get as many of those beneficiaries that are registered to migrate into digital to ensure that they do so during the time as we lead towards analog switch off. Chair, with that, I would then retreat and allow the SABC leadership to get into the substance of the presentations, and with your guidance, we will be able to play our role as and when is required during the course of the discussion, supported by the team from the department. Thank you.
Thank you. You are welcome to present to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson, members of the Portfolio Committee, Minister, Deputy Minister, DG, Group CEO, and all others that are present. It's already been introduced. My name is Nomvuyiso Baji. I am the Deputy Chairperson of the SABC. Mine is to just have a few opening remarks as to what has happened since the board took over in 2023. We came in as a board in 2023, just after the SABC was previously allocated a bailout. There were a number of challenges that came with that within the SABC. So what we had to focus on was to how to ensure the SABC actually keep the lights on, because the bailout only managed to cover part of what the SABC needed to do. Over and above, you may recognize, Chairperson, that the role of the public broadcaster as it currently stands has actually changed globally, not only in South Africa. It is in the space of public media. You will recognize that the document that the CEO is going to present with the CFO is a document that deals with the priorities of the SABC insofar as the strategic focus that we want to take moving forward. Going back to the issue of public media, I just wanted to alert the members that currently audiences, as you would be aware, are consuming content differently. Most people are using bi-directional equipment, such as handsets, no longer using screen. They consume content differently. It's more individualized, and they have different options that are available insofar as platforms and applications. The industry as a whole, not only the SABC, has been highly disrupted by technology insofar as the choices that are there. You will see that audiences in South Africa are also consuming international content, not only local. In this regard, SABC is required to heavily invest in both technology and fresh content that will be that consumers have to consume. As you will know, as you are already aware, SABC has a dual mandate. That is the commercial mandate and the public service mandate. And when it comes to the commercial mandate, it has to compete both with local and global entities in order to survive. Just to give you an example, so for content, it's mostly focusing insofar as the local players. And also when it comes to revenue, that most of our advertising revenue our direct competitors are local placed. Now, when you're looking at the issue of public service mandate, we believe that at this time and place, Chair, the role of the SABC has become very, very important, because we are living at a time of misinformation, disinformation, and artificial intelligence, that people are being misled each and every day insofar as news is concerned. Also note that SABC still has an unfunded public mandate, and we have to use our commercial revenues to fund the public mandate insofar as some of our programming. We do note that from our side, we are required to be innovative, despite the fact that our funding model has not changed in over the 50 years time. When I'm counting 50, I'm counting from 1975, because TV in South Africa switched off in 1976. So switched on in 1970. So we're starting from that time that the monopoly in South Africa of SABC, as it was then, started then. We do note that insofar as the analog switch off, SABC has lost audiences in areas that have been already have been switched off, And the basis of this is that advertisers, the less audiences that you have, advertisers are not coming on board to advertise with you. So enough with a sort of a sad story. Insofar as the things that we have achieved in 2024 as the SABC board is that we have completed and filled in critical vacancies, such as that of the group CEO. We've also have filled in just recently the COO. We have and also group executive HR and marketing and corporate affairs, although that falls really under the realm of the CEO. We have a vacancy of the CFO, which it's in the market as of the January 2025. So we are happy as the board that the top structure of the SABC is strategically aligned in order to take us forward. And we are saying that as the board, we have come up with management a clear and compelling strategy that has an executable pathway aligned with the budget. And we're also saying that as of last year, which has been commended also by the IEC and related parties, is that the SABC covered the elections last year in an exceptional manner. We see that there is issues around radio shows and that they have a potential to exist despite the challenges that are being faced. Insofar as people issues, human resources, we have ensured that the organization is better focused and aligned. Governance in itself, taking over from the previous board, we have ensured that governance is being strengthened and is being improved day by day. And we had, as of last year, received a very positive audit finding. And we have put in place internal controls and systems to ensure that is happening. And just to talk to also the new culture that is there at the SABC, we have also seen that there is greater transparency on the side of the group CEO and more accountability insofar as to how things are done. And so far as costs, the SABC, which is the most toughest thing that the CEO is faced with, we have ensured that in the last financial year that the costs are managed effectively and in some instances not...
Sorry for the interjection. May I ask, are you working?
No, I'm
not
just
yet.
opening.
Oh,
Yes, she's
okay,
going to,
thank
yes.
you.
So maybe let me just rush to the things that we're looking forward to. The things that we're looking forward to moving forward as the board is that we actually are looking for an acceleration of regulatory processes. Insofar as ICASA has been slow in terms of making decisions and inquiries in this regard, and some of them are dated in this way. Also, we require an innovative funding model that enables financial sustainability of the SABC. And we require urgent investment in solutions in order to mitigate analog switch off. So we would really say, I appreciate the support of this committee moving forward, Chairperson and your members. And I'll pause and allow the CEO to go through the presentation. I thank you.
Good afternoon to you, Chair, to the Honourable Minister, Honourable DM, the Deputy Chair of the SABC and the DG. Thank you for the invitation here today and the opportunity for the SABC to give the honourable members of this committee feedback regarding the performance of the SABC. In terms of the presentation we bring to here today, it's really drawn on the brief that you provided us when you sent us out the invitation to us. And we are going to be imparting pertinent information regarding our financial sustainability, our operational challenges, problems that we've encountered in executing our strategy, but I think also most importantly, to give a balanced view of also some of the successes and the green shoots that we are seeing from an SABC perspective. There's a couple of questions that we need to be answered in terms of the background in which we find ourselves, which I believe both the Honourable Minister and the Deputy Chair of the SABC at a high level have spoken to. What is our context? Because that's very critical in understanding some of our performance challenges. and also the key challenges and opportunities that have been presented to us, how we intend and are dealing with them, because that's important. It should not only be seen that these are plans going forward, but these are plans that are being executed. And obviously, how is the financial position affecting us? I think what's important here is that we need to look at the SABC as a public service media enterprise, because it's changed from just being a broadcaster, because there's been an evolution that has taken place where media has converged globally. You know, previously, Honorable Chair, is that we would talk about TV, we would talk about radio as separate entities, but today if you talk to a teenager, TV to them is the screen on the palm of their hand. It's not what we grew up with looking, you know, at the wall. The media economy is massive globally, and what's interesting for us is that 5 of the top 10 radio stations on the African continent are actually on the SABC portfolio. And I say this, Chair, because I think when we tend to talk about the SABC, there tends to be a big focus on just the video entertainment business, meaning TV. So when we talk about analog switch off, we talk about television. But we need to remember that the SABC is bigger than television stations. So when I talk about the fact that the top 10 radio stations, 5 of the top 10 are from the SABC portfolio, it starts giving you the scale of what the SABC really is. And I think what's important is that the SABC plays a massive role, especially when it comes, and now from a video entertainment perspective, for South Africans who can't afford subscription services. And if you look at the structure of our socio-economic environment, you realize that that's a big chunk of our population. And only really have their source of credible news, of sports, of information, of entertainment and education from the SABC itself. And I think it's also critical that we explain that the SABC plays a massive role in the local creative economy. We have traditionally invested in local content. If you look at just our top performing content in prime time, all of it is local content. And therefore, what's exciting about us is that we've developed local content to be licensed globally. So I always point out to people that if you go to Jamaica today, you will find Generations on Jamaican screens, because Generations actually has traveled and it has global relevance and global interest. Therefore, what it means is that we've got a future-focused strategy that really contributes to economic growth and to developing a capable state that is South Africa. This is just the portfolio for SABC, and it just talks to your video entertainment and news. News, Honorable Chair, SABC has the biggest newsroom on the African continent by virtue of just the fact that we present news in every South African language. We are the only media house that does that, when everybody else actually does it in English. And that's very, very critical. But we still have the largest portfolio of media brands. And what's exciting for us, Honorable Chair and members, is basically the growth that we are seeing coming through from our OTT streaming platform, and I'll talk to it a bit later, because that's really what we see as an opportunity for us to compete with the disruption that is taking place in the digital ecosystem. And what's interesting as well, Honorable Chair, is that if you look at YouTube, SABC is actually the largest content provider from a news perspective. We've actually reached more than 1 billion views on just our news alone. The Chair has spoken to the structuring of our mandate in terms of the public mandate, and we also have the commercial mandate, which is underpinned by everything from news to the radio stations I was talking to. But I think what's important here, and Tendai will come in and assist me when we get to later on in the slides, where we talk about the cost of the unfunded mandate, that 55% of mandate costs are funded by declining license fees and the grant, which is 4%, and I'll talk to it later, that comes from the department. But that in the MTF process, the total cost of the unfunded mandate is 7 billion rand, just above 7 billion rand. But let me go through the evolution timeline, because this is critical to just understand how the SABC got to where it is today. There's been quite changes that have taken place in media. So if we look at the evolution, my chair was talking about 1976. So we all know that the SABC itself was established in 1936. But in 1976, something critical happened. Television was launched. So radio existed before, but television was launched, and the SABC became a monopoly because it was the only player in town. And then when we moved on, we moved to 1979, where the radio market really now starts opening up with Capital Radio. but the TV monopoly is firmly in place and is very much entrenched. And then in 1986, the television market opened up with the launch of Mnet. I think some of us remember, we could only afford to watch Open Time. And at 7 o'clock, that signal, disappeared. And every day you hoped it wouldn't disappear, but it did. So Mnet came in, and the regulated market for radio and television took hold. And then when we moved down to 1996 and 1998, something very important happened, that then there was a sell-off of 6 SABC radio stations. They were carved out of the SABC. And that sell-off was Highveld, Jacaranda, KFM, and its brands that you're all very familiar with, who today are actually SABC from a radio perspective, its biggest competitors. But what's critical here, why we show this slide as well, is that in any environment, if there's a sell-off, the money tends to get invested back into the organization. However, the revenue that came from the sell-off of the 6 radio stations went into the fiscus. It's not money that was invested into SABC. But what also happened during this time, we saw the rapid growth of the television market in terms of the introduction of DSTV as a bouquet, because at first it was just Mnet. Now you had the DSTV bouquet, and you also had the entry of ETV. And then the biggest disruption took place starting in 2005, where the digital era, where we all started talking about the 4th industrial revolution. But the digital era came into being with the launch of Facebook. And then in 2016, we had Netflix, you had all the OTT streaming platforms coming in. But the most interesting one was the TikTok growth from 2020, which is user-generated content. South Africa presents one of the fastest growing markets, for example, for TikTok. And then in 2022, which I'm sure the honorable members are very much aware of, then we saw the sell-off of the spectrum to the telcos. And this greatly benefited the fiscus, where 14 billion rand was raised. And SABC did vacate, I think it was about 116 of those frequencies in order for the spectrum to be sold. The interesting part again, which is the same thing that happened with the sell-off of the 6 radio stations, is that the capital that was raised from the sale of the spectrum was retained by National Treasury, and again, no reinvestment was made into the SABC. So this is just a short summary of what has happened with the SABC. But I think what's important, the takeout here should be just the disruption that has taken place in terms of the digital era, which is what we find ourselves in. The SABC funding model, to the chair's point, has not changed in 50 years, and the reality is that it's no longer relevant. The good news here, Honourable Chair, is that the SABC is not the only public service media entity struggling with the funding model. I think this is a global phenomenon. We all know that my colleague at the back knows that the BBC is also facing the same challenge, even though from a revenue perspective, from a licensing perspective, they have the biggest amount of people who actually pay for TV licenses. But they've realized that for the long term, they can't just rely on that alone, because the disruption is real. So everybody's grappling with it, although they don't have the type of challenges we have. SABC is funded from the commercial mandate, where licensing compliance level have dropped substantially to 14% of the license base. And what's interesting about the licensing compliance is that the people who pay are the people who've always paid. So meaning that the people who are buying new TVs are not paying. So a lot of the income that we get is from people who've probably been paying for TV licenses for the past 10 years. But anybody who's coming in as a new user, which means also younger people entering the market, don't see the reason why they should pay for a TV license. It's a hyper-competitive industry. Advertising revenue is how we survive. In the next slide, I'll talk through it. And advertising revenue as well, members, is that we've seen a shift from linear radio and linear TV to digital media. And I have to clarify this for you. When I say digital media, I'm not talking about OTT streaming platforms, because there's always a belief that advertisers have taken money there. No. The biggest competitors for advertising rands is actually Facebook and Google and YouTube, etc. And that's money that literally gets paid by the advertisers in South Africa, and it gets taken offshore. It's not money that even stays in the country. And those are the biggest gains that have been made, in a sense that the advertising revenue for traditional players have shrunk, but the foreign players have really gained and are taking the lion's share of advertising. So what's important here is that none of our competitors actually have a public interest mandate. We are the only ones, and therefore we are the only ones who bear that cost structure that is associated with that. And therefore that is why that enabling legislation is very critical. So where does the revenue come from SABC? Because I'm sure you've all read in the papers, in the media, in terms of licensing fees, etc. I always refer to this as 1383.4. 13% of our income comes from license fees, which traditionally, the way the SABC structured to the Deputy Chair's point, this was supposed to actually keep the public service mandate alive. That's if all South Africans were complying, there wouldn't be a challenge. But we have an evasion of more than 80%, for example, and therefore, and we're seeing a declining levels of this compliance because it's seen as irrelevant. But also importantly, to be remiss of me to not say this, that in fact in South Africa, the license fee, unlike the debate that is taking place in the UK, which is about the increase of the license fee, we haven't seen an increase in the license fee since. No, no. That's the model. That's
2018.
Yeah, so but it's a while. So the license fee in South Africa does not get increased. In fact, every application we've made for the increase in the fee has been declined by Treasury, meaning in terms of, if you just look at it, is that every year the fee actually has gone down from a rand perspective if you look at inflation. 83% of our revenue is commercial, honorable members. It's from advertisers and sponsors, meaning that the SABC is a commercial entity. That is really how we operate. And then 4% comes from the government grant, and the government grant has preconditions attached to it in terms of the specific initiatives in which it can be used for. So we can't take this 4% and do anything that we want to do with it. We have to honor the prescripts that the government grant comes with. So, and that's literally where it comes from. And in terms of funding of public broadcasters, you can even see in first world countries, public broadcasters are funded. They play a massive role in society. And the deputy chair talked about information and disinformation. There's a recognition that without a public broadcaster, without public service media, we will live in a world where fake news will become the norm. So at the moment in South Africa, the role of the SABC is very interesting in that there will be breaking news on your social media platforms, on whether it's X or whether it's Facebook, but people will always have to fact check against whether it's breaking news on SABC. That's when they know whether it's true or not. And that's a massive role that we play in society. But I think also the massive role we play in society is the issue of representing South African views in terms of the plurality of views and ensuring that we've got universal access, that every South African has access to the news and to information. So this slide, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but and I'll ask my colleague on my right to jump in and speak to some of it. But this is the cost of the unfunded mandate. You've got those slides, and I'm sure you've studied them. Therefore, I'll take it that you've looked at it. But I think what's important here is that what we spoke to earlier in terms of the fact that the public mandate is funded by our commercial activity. That 83% that I was talking to, that revenue, is what actually goes and funds the public mandate. But the challenge with that, honorable members, is that we are literally taking from OPEX and funding CAPEX. So we are unable as SABC to invest for the future. And I'll talk to that later on, because that's very critical in the disrupted world, where technology plays a very big role in ensuring that you're still relevant to new audiences who grew up as digital natives, who grew up in a multi-platform world, and who actually consume content when they wanted, where they wanted, on whatever screen they wanted. So that's very critical. So I think what's important here for me for this slide is if you start seeing the breakdown in terms of the TV mandate, that's what we refer to as video entertainment, the radio mandate, which is very important. We've also got the sports mandate, because we've got sports of national interest that the SABC, from a licensing perspective, has to honor for South Africans. And then we've got the news mandate, which we are very proud of, we must say, but it takes quite a big chunk off in terms of costs from an SABC perspective. So what is the importance of public service media? The DC did speak to it, but the reality is it's about serving communities, you know. At the end of the day, that's how those communities get their daily connection, and in all indigenous languages. And that's really, we believe that as the SABC, we play a massive role in ensuring that South Africa's democracy is alive and well, because we gave that opportunity, the platforms, for everybody to have their voices heard. And in the world of fake news, which I spoke to earlier, who do you trust? We are credible and we are trusted. And that's what's very important from an SABC perspective. And we have competent people who on a daily basis deliver across those different genres that I spoke to. We also deliver a national identity. And if you looked at the polarization of the world today, if you look at geopolitics, what is coming out of the United States, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Russia, etc., you realize that the preservation of national identities has become an urgent issue for a lot of nations. And what we do there is that we really do wave the South African flag as the SABC, and we promote social cohesion. I mean, if you just looked at the news in the last 2 weeks, in terms of the role we've played in educating South Africans about our soldiers in the Congo, supporting them to be brought home, and really putting the human voice and the human, face to who these soldiers are. And that drives a sense of national identity. You know, it promotes that cohesion to say, as South Africans, we are one nation. And more, as we say, in a fragmented world, that's very important. And as I've already spoken about the plurality of views. But also what's important is the preservation of indigenous languages. Indigenous languages are actually at a risk, whether it's Afrikaans, whether it's Xhosa, whether it's Tsonga. The reality is that it's us that give that platform for those languages to still thrive. The global platforms I'm referring to, actually, that is not something they're focusing on. They only now have started realizing there's a role to play there, but SABC is still way ahead. But importantly, and it's not here, Honorable Chair, is that SABC is the greatest archivist and historian of South Africa. Because if you were looking for what did Mandela say when he walked out of Victor Feste, where are you going to find it? It's in the SABC archives. So we have the biggest archives, in fact, on the African continent, not just about South Africa, by the way, but about other African countries. If you look at the coverage, for example, of the Mozambican elections, if you look at the coverage of Sam Nujoma's funeral, if you look at the coverage of the Botswana elections, these are just recent things, but we play that massive role on just the African continent itself. So it's very important that we also inspire and empower people. Then we come to where we are going, which is critical. And this is what we call really the flywheel impact, which shows just the ecosystem in which we work into. This is important for us, Honorable Chair, because, like I said, when we talk media, we tend to lean very much to TV. But what this does, it talks about the fact that there is a choice across media platforms in terms of channels and screens. And how is the SABC then orchestrating that ecosystem and ensuring that we are leveraging where consumers are, and that we ensure that in these times of transformation, that we are prioritizing our investment and investing ahead of the curve. And I'm really proud to say to you that despite the challenges that we are facing, it's a deliberate decision that we've made to say that this is really what the framework that the SABC holds itself accountable for, and that we are prioritizing that investment in compelling content, because we always say that we're in the attention economy. That's where we are at the end of the day. We fight for just to get attention on a daily basis. We compete with everybody for attention, and we are in the eyeballs and ears business. So that investment for compelling content and accessibility on digital platforms is important. And I'm certain there are a lot of people when SABC announced its foray into the OTT streaming platform, thought that the SABC would fail, because it's quite a competitive world. Where would they get the technological know-how to actually be able to execute this? As I sit here today, we rebased SABC Plus in July last year. The target for us was that at the end of March 2025, we would have 500,000 users on that platform. At the end of January, we had more than 700,000 unique registrations. and the people who actually utilize that as their key source of entertainment. So what, I'm not gonna really go a lot through this because the chair has spoken to it. I think what's important is that it just reinforces just some of the progress that we have made. But again, to reinforce the issue of our people. SABC people are very committed to the SABC. That's why, as you sit here today, you've seen in terms of just the coverage outside of the budget speech, you know, the greatest coverage would come from the SABC. If you look at just their governance reputation is significantly improved, which the Honourable Minister spoke to. We've got a new culture emerging where we have recognized that we need to have greater transparency, but more accountability as well. But importantly, that we must compete. We mustn't think that because we are, you know, a government entity, that we should sit back and wait for government to come and save us. We must compete in a very, disrupted world. We are also playing, very measured and very deliberate in managing our costs. We survive because we really are managing our cost structure. And we are focused as we sit here to deliver on 70% of our KPIs. And when we do that, we would be literally about 40% up from the previous year from delivery of those KPIs. So in terms of our immediate challenges, they've been spoken about. You've got this. And Chair, I'll take it that it's been read. It's not new, the challenges that you're setting. It's the analog switch off that has been spoken to, the funding model, which is very critical, but also the regulations that, we are waiting for them to be finalized so that they can establish an enabling governance and funding environment for us in order to continue with the public mandate that we've been given. And what's currently holding us back, which is something that you asked us to say, from an operational perspective, what are the challenges? The reality is content is king and queen in our industry, but content has become very expensive because there's now a lot of players in this industry. So content producers have choice. So what has happened is that because of our financial constraints, we have been struggling with content, but at the same time, we have been innovative in how we address this content challenge, which I will talk to later. The slow pace of movement to the new innovative funding model has also slowed us down, but we've got the minister on our left, and we know that that is something, the priority that he's putting focus on, and there's a clear understanding that the funding model is very critical in order to drive the SABC forward in a changed world. We have an inability to borrow to fund CAPEX because we are seen as a government entity, and unfortunately government entities are all swiped, with the same brush, where when we go to the capital markets, they're seeing us as a massive, massive risk because of just the perception that we carry as a public entity. So Mr. Matore, who spends a lot of time, we spend a lot of time together talking to potential funders, even though some of them will say, you know what, we are interested, but I still have to talk to my board, and they read such a report, and therefore, the people who do the approvals in terms of my credit risk, committee, my approvals committee, they are very jittery about, funding, your entity. We struggle with execution. We've got some systems and people constraints because the reality is that the world has changed from a technology, automation, etc., and our systems are very much far behind. So we don't have the type of agility that our competitors have, and we've been slow in monetizing our OTT streaming platform. But it's important for me to say this: everybody has been slow in monetizing streaming platforms. It took 15 years for Netflix to be profitable. And this is something that doesn't get spoken about. The reason Netflix could do what it did is because it had funders, it had investors who every year poured money into it with a long-term vision that at some point it will turn profitable. We unfortunately don't have that type of long-term investment. We don't have the type of funding that the likes of Disney, Netflix, Showmax, MultiChoice have, eMedia have in terms of funding. So it's important because when we talk about ourselves, because we're a public entity, we say, oh no, we don't have the commercial know-how. But it's taken a very long time for those entities to actually become profitable. And obviously the ASO uncertainty is very important because that talks to the loss of audiences. In our world, and you'll see in the slides we've given you, if you look at that, that flywheel, is that audiences means that you get advertising. Advertisers buy audiences. That's it. That's all they buy. That's what you sell. You know, you go to advertisers and you say, at such a time, I've got X audiences that are there. You're able to segment them, and you say, these audiences are either in our language SAM 4-7 or the high-value audiences. That's what they buy. So if you don't have those audiences, the advertisers don't come. And if the advertisers don't come, you don't have the money to go buy compelling content that brings in the audiences. So hence, you know, that cycle, that flywheel, that is very important for us to understand that one can't exist without the other. So that's a very important one. And therefore, what have we done about compelling content? Because, Honorable Chair, we are not here to just look at the challenges, but also what are the, you know, opportunities, or how is SABC actually looking at this and addressing its challenges? So one of the key things that we've done is leveraging strategic partnerships, because we can't afford, we don't have the capital to go and buy content. So historically, SABC used to 100% own every piece of content that we used to have on TV. The world has changed. If you look at Netflix, they don't own probably 95, if not 98% of the content on Netflix. They're an aggregator. That's what they do. They go out and do content partnerships. They license, just like I was talking about, Generations, that's been licensed to, you know, to Jamaica. So what we've done is that we've looked at local and global distributors, and we've struck up strategic partnerships where, for example, we've got what is called the BBC block, because we've bought content from the BBC. We've got a partnership with the local entity, Prime Media, where we look at what they call shiny floor shows. And this is just the beginning of it. We've had a lot of interest from other you know, distributors to partner with us when it comes to content. But also for us, if we go back to the legacy content that we've got, which we are busy digitizing, that we are also going to be going out and repurposing it and selling it. And this is important. I'm not saying that we're going to take our archives and sell them and they disappear. We're just licensing them for usage so that, you know, we make revenue out of them. So I think for us, it's very, very important. We've really developed relationships across. We're looking at global players, and we're ensuring that we tap into that creator economy to ensure that we stay relevant from a content perspective. Then the significant opportunities I've spoken to earlier, I'm not going to repeat myself, but it's OTT streaming. We've spoken about technology, which is a very important one, and in terms of the role of digital media. In terms of our current reality, and this for me, Honourable Chair and honourable members, I hope it's a slide that you've spent time on. The SABC has unparalleled reach and access. No one competes with us when it comes to reach. We have an average of 26.7 million people who come to listen or to watch on our platforms on a daily basis. There is no other broadcaster who's got those type of numbers. We also have legacy content that is still very relevant today. So what we're doing with SABC Plus, our OTT streaming platform, is that we are actually digitizing and utilizing that legacy content on those platforms. But what's interesting as well is that as part of those partnerships I was talking to you about, is that there's an interest, and I'm sure some of you have seen, there's old movies like, let's say, Miami Vice that I grew up watching. My age is showing now. I grew up watching Miami Vice. But what has happened is that because they were blockbusters, they are being redone for the modern audience. So there's an opportunity. You all remember Yizo Yizo, for example, which was a massive blockbuster in South Africa. There's an interest. We're talking to global producers where we are looking at a revised Yizo Yizo. And so we've got a lot of blockbusters on our archives that we are going in there and looking at the potential for syndication globally. And that's going to assist us from a growth perspective if you look at the vision that we've got going forward. Radio listenership, Tendai and I were talking about the fact that this is really still for us untapped. It's really untapped. And we've got loyal audiences. We've got all the languages. The opportunity is for us to grow the revenue share. That's really where it's sitting. But our radio listenership, it's Ukozi FM alone has more than 7 million people who listen to it on a daily basis. And that's critical for me to say that. And again, remember those top 4 radio stations I spoke about earlier on in Africa? Ukhozi is one of them. The number 1 commercial radio station in South Africa is not what you would think about commercial radio station. It's actually Metro FM. That's number 1. And that's where young people are gravitating. It holds a massive youth appeal. So our radio listenership, for me, is very critical. And when we talk about audiences, it's important to not forget the role of radio. They said radio would die when TV came. Radio has not died. Radio has grown. Radio has actually innovated. There's podcasts, there's visual radio. I mean, if you just look at Spotify, that's radio. You know, that's what's happened. So our radio listenership is critical. Our people are very important in ensuring that we deliver on our strategy. We've got a massive advertising inventory. If you start looking at that multi-platform, multi-screening, environment I was talking to you about. And then there's something very important that we've got as SABC that we haven't really monetized or leveraged in terms of the audience data that we've got, you know. And data is... We're in the data economy. The DG is sitting over here, and she has a great understanding, for example, that in this world, it's a fight for data. Those with the data will win at the end of the day. That's why everybody every day is harvesting your personal information. It's because it's data that advertisers are buying. And being the greatest archivist, the greatest historian, who's got more data? It's the SABC. So that we're growing. These are our areas of focus. We call them the 10 breakout programs. I'm not going to go through it because I've covered it to a certain extent. But this is what our North Star looks like. We always say, if we deliver on these, the SABC will be sustainable for the future. These are very well thought out. They're based on insights, on research, on market sizing, on looking at what we call the 3 horizons, which I'll go through just after this. But it's really a thorough analysis of where our strategic opportunities are lying, and we believe that this is where it is. And then what's important in terms of some of the things that we're doing is we are thinking in horizons, and it's important of us to think in horizons, because if we are not careful, Honorable Chair, we will not exist, because we're only thinking about if we are going to pay salaries this month. It's not the type of space we should be doing. And I always use a great South African company when I talk to this slide, because I think it's a very good one to use. So if you think about Discovery, when it started, we all thought it was, what was it doing? So all Discovery was, it was selling medical aid and insurance. That's what we thought about Discovery, you know? But Discovery was what we call Horizon 1. So that's all it was. But Discovery was never about insurance. That's what they were using to get to where they are today, which I'm sure it's still their Horizon 1. So Horizon 1 is what you are today, you're optimizing. Horizon 2 is where you're going, where you're innovating. But Horizon 3 is where the disruption takes place. What did Discovery do? They became a bank. One of a massive, massive bank. And Capitec is one of those that is disrupted. Capitec is #1 retail bank in South Africa today. We used to talk about the big 4. Capitec is now #1. So that's what SABC is saying when we say public service media. We're saying for today, we're looking at radio, linear TV, but the reality is that going forward, with the type of audience that's existing in South Africa today, the average age of the median age of South Africans is 27.4 years old. And what does that mean? The majority of South Africans are below the age of 28. Those are the people that we should be worried about. And those are the people that don't switch on the TV and watch on the wall, you know? So that's literally, as SABC, you know, the discussions that we are having with the department are to say that in order to stay relevant and in order to still play a role from, you know, a public media perspective, we need to think in these horizons. And this is the new slide, Chair, that you said I must point out. So this is the slide that we've put in, just to show our thinking process for the next couple of years, where we're thinking in disruption. So And I think the DG will be, is happy to also see this, which is something we've been working on with the department as well. What's important is that currently, as we sit here, we talk about TV. We're busy with those partnerships I spoke about. We're busy with the digitization of our archives. We've already digitized more than 60,000 hours, and that project is ongoing, and we're going to be syndicating that content, not just to to the players that but to other players as well. Then the innovation comes in. We talk about analog switch off, but the opportunity that analog presents, switch off, because SABC, by the way, is in support of digital migration. It's important for us to say that. We are in support of it because the world has changed. Analog has reached end of life as a technology. And therefore digital migration is the future. So we are 100% in support of it. And to that end, we are also looking at how do we ensure our sustainability in that world, and therefore our DTH solution becomes very, very important. We are looking at funding activities for infrastructure, but as I said earlier, we do hit those challenges when it comes to being an SOE, but we believe that some of our discussions are actually going to be bearing fruit because based on our strategy, we do have potential funders that see the value proposition in what we are doing and the fact that we've thought beyond our current selves. So that's the slide that we've put in. And the financial sustainability one you received earlier, Chair, if I may, I'm not going to really labor the point, but it does speak to the long-term financial sustainability, also with the assistance, obviously, of an enabling regulatory environment. Then I'm going to get to this one, and I think what was important here is that the bailout itself that SABC received was in 2018, 2019. So if you think about the fact that we're in 2025, and go back to the timeline that I showed you in terms of what has happened to the media world in the last, couple of years. So 2018 in our world is a century ago. That's literally what has happened. And I'm going to hand over to Mr. Matore to just at a high level talk us through it.
Afternoon, Chair and members of the committee, Minister DP, and observing all protocols on this side of the table. When we received the funding from National Treasury, as the CEO has mentioned, it had some preconditions which we had to meet and met, and the funding was utilized and dispersed in the manner as we described. About 1.2 billion of that went to content, 1.4 at that time went to historical creditors that we had accumulated and we needed funding for, and just about 600 million has been invested in technology and long-term capital projects. It is important just to mention and emphasize that as we went through the process of utilizing these funds, we did participate in monthly and frequent updates and reviews of how we spend that money and the funding with the department and National Treasury. And the governance around the utilization of those funds has been, I think, up to the expectations of the National Treasury and our key stakeholders. And as mentioned earlier by the Minister, that even in terms of our overall governance audit outcomes, it does give credence to how well we have governed our financial resources in most recent times. What we frequently stumble on as a question is, but after having received those funds, how then do we still persist to be facing financial sustainability issues? I think in addition to everything that the CEO has raised, it is just critical to point the context in which the funding was invested, that as we were going through the utilization application of the funds, we went through our COVID-19 pandemic, and out of that, the economy and spending within the economy across board was significantly curtailed, and more so in the marketing and advertising sectors of the economy. And the ASO switch off also began at that time, and we did suffer some loss of audiences and hence advertisers, and the discussions around the legislative certainty and the timing of that process at that point further made it difficult for the market to invest long term. And it further put us in a position where we could not fully utilize and derive the benefit of the investment that we had made. And lastly, I think the impact again during that period of the extended load shedding meant that viewers were spending less and less time watching TV because they would not have power, and as a result also the industry, which is our core revenue driver, invested less in advertising, and hence we also managed to derive a portion, or not fully, the benefits that would have thought or would have wanted to achieve as part of those investments. I'll hand over to the CEO. Chair.
Thank you. So those slides that, Honourable Chair, that Tenda has gone through, those were the 2 additional slides that came through that to the bailout utilization. So those were the 2 slides. So it was the one at the top that I spoke to in these 2 slides, but the rest is what was in the presentation. So what is impacting our operations? We spoke about the funding challenges in terms of the CapEx challenges that we've got. And I think what this has done is that it's curtailed our ability to invest in the latest broadcasting technology. And this has reputational implications for us, because the reality is that our infrastructure is aged. It's reached end of life. And we're at a point with some of it that you literally don't have spare parts to replace, because that technology is no longer, being used, not just in South Africa, but globally as well. Our infrastructure is aging, and the reality is that at the moment we are struggling to maintain but the most important part is that we can't afford to replace it, because, and the reason for that is that we are funding our CapEx, our infrastructure funding comes from our operational income. So there's only so much that that your OPEX can do. Ideally, you should be able to get a long-term, let's say, ingestion, where you get a 20-year loan, think about how we buy our houses, and be able to pay it off over a longer period. And therefore, that's how you could fund your infrastructure ambitions. But at the moment, we don't have access to that type of funding. And the funding that we received from the bailout did fund some of the infrastructure, but it was not enough to actually fund the entire list of what was required. The other issue is the content issue that I spoke to, that it's a fight for content that we've got. If you just looked at the OTT streaming platforms, and it's evolving at speed, and we've been lucky as SABC that we still compete as we do when it comes to prime time, which is a very interesting one, but also a sign of our understanding of audiences. But the reality is that we are falling behind, because you can't just have that much of a reliance on one TV channel. Every TV channel should play a massive role in ensuring that it brings in audiences. But at the moment, that is not what is happening, because we can't afford to invest in content for the entire portfolio. The legacy content I've spoken to in terms of a key priority of ours. And the other one is really the upskilling and reskilling of our people in a new world of work. The world has really changed. And one of the key things that we're trying to do, Honourable Chair and members, is bringing in talent, attracting talent. And in our world, this is where there's scarce and valuable skills. If you just look at our competitors, they are recruiting globally. Because, if you start talking about artificial intelligence, it's not something that we can say as South Africans we are way ahead of the curve when it comes to that. So therefore, that fight for talent. But what we've done very well, and I'm very proud of, is that we are a preferred learning organization for students that are graduating from media degrees. So when young people are at Vega or at VETS, etc., we are their preferred organization for them to come in for graduate training. And in fact, we won an award to that effect. So it means that we are able to attract young people. They see the value of working for the institutions such as the SABC. And then how do we ensure that then we retain them? And the retention issue then brings us to the limited opportunities for youth, but it's something that we are looking at because at the end of the day, there is an opportunity for them to learn in terms of the digital media sector and to contribute towards the sustainment of the public media entity that is SABC. We are struggling with the mandate for sports of national interest. If I can just explain to you that the free-to-air package for the PSL has more than 200 matches, and I'm not talking about cup games now. We've got about 40 of them, just less, just below that. Yeah, it's the Premier Soccer League, which is, South Africa is a football nation, that's the #1 sport. So if you just look at the cost of the PSL rights and the other, cup games that come with it, they cost 100 million rand a season. Now for SABC, it means that you must be able to monetize that, to get back your 100 million and to make a profit out of it. We don't have subscription fees that help our competitors to afford that type of expenditure. And therefore, when we talk about sports of national interest, these sports, we don't get them for free. We compete with our with the other commercial entities in order to have access to those rights, which are classified as sports of national interest. Therefore, there's an affordability issue there. And then obviously I've spoken to the culture in terms of shaping the culture and building a collective responsibility. The chair, the deputy chair of the SABC has spoken to basically the support that we are asking this committee to help the SABC with. And more than anything, we're asking for advocacy in accelerating the processes for amendments to the regulations that we currently face. We are competing with entities that are not being hamstrung by regulations. I used to work for one of the competitors years ago, and I remember then the belief was for any content organization to come into South Africa, you need a license to trade, just like the SABC, just like the telcos, etc. No, all you needed was an internet connection and a bank account. There's no license. These are entities that are based outside of South Africa that have an audience in South Africa. So what's happening is that we are competing against people who are not really being held to account by the same regulations that hold us to account. And we are fighting for the same rand, going back to that 83% that I was speaking to, the 1383.4. So that 83% that we're getting, we are fighting with all those entities to retain that 83%. And to our CFO's point, we've lost quite a sizable amount of that revenue. So that's basically what we are asking. And I'm at that last slide in terms of just the ask, in terms of, and what's important here, honorable members, is that as SABC, we are asking for a change of narrative. The SABC is not asking government for a bailout. It's important for us to say that. But what we are talking about is that we are asking for equitable funding for the public media enterprise. We're saying commercially we've proven that we are capable of competing from a commercial perspective. But to the earlier slides, our commercial income is funding the public mandate. The public mandate is an expensive mandate. And unfortunately, not everything in the public mandate is seen as value for the advertisers that I spoke to about earlier. So we are asking for that there's a greater understanding of what is a public media enterprise, what are the requirements for a public media enterprise to survive in a disrupted world where there's new forms of content and media organizations, and how does then South Africa ensure that in a world of misinformation, of disinformation, you still have a trusted media enterprise that is going to deliver information and education to South Africans. We spoke about the elections and the role of the SABC, whereby we have what we call wall-to-wall coverage. We are the only people who can do that. We are the ones who supply all the feed to the BBC, to CNN, to everybody during an event of that nature. The G20 is coming up later on in the year, and SABC will play a massive role in terms of carrying that message from South Africa to the rest of the world. Our newsroom is going to be doing that, but most importantly also ensuring South Africans are informed across the multiplicity of languages that South Africa has. And that for us, that public mandate, that universal access, ensuring that whether it's my uncle, your uncle, etc., have that access is very, very important for us. So that's for us that we'd like. And also what we are saying is that the SABC is confident that with the measures that we are putting in place and the advocacy that we are asking for, both from our shareholder, both from other stakeholders, that it will assist the SABC to still not just remain relevant, but ensure that it is at the forefront of preserving our democracy and our national identity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for a comprehensive report. This is something that I've been waiting for quite some time, and I think as members we received a very good presentation. If I may ask, Minister, through you, I think quite a few questions are going to emanate from this presentation. If I could allow the members 4 or 5 questions each, and then those that cannot be answered now, or if there are more questions, that we put it in writing to you through the Secretariat, and then you can respond to us in writing. The written questions, we'll have until Friday to draw them up and send them through to Madia, and she will then send it to you, and if we could get a response back from you in 7 days. Minister, would that suffice?
Chairperson, yes, we are guided by how the committee operates, so yeah, I think that would be reasonable for us.
Thank you very much. Honourable Dlamini, you missed that, I think. If I may start, we're going to do 5 questions, and if we have any more questions after that, 5 per member, we can put it in writing and send it by Friday. If I can start, I'm going to start with the lady first, and then I'm going to have a gentleman and a lady and a gentleman and go down the line like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say thank you very much for a very elaborate presentation. I think I got to know the SABC far more than I thought I knew it, and the good work that you've put in. My question, I'm not going to probably have 5 questions. My concern is the relationship between SABC and the Treasury. It seems to me there's a lack of cohesion, or somehow maybe Treasury doesn't understand your mandate, or I don't know, but I would like to know how come, for example, 14 billion was raised for spectrum auctions and it was never given back to SABC. Also, just the lack of financial guarantees from the National Treasury. What have you done so far? Has there been any meetings to sort of untangle those legal frustrations that you've had with National Treasury? Because I think if we had known, we would have actually called National Treasury to be here today as well, you know, to untangle that. Also, can you elaborate on the challenges? I mean, what has the funding model, why has the funding model of the SABC remained the same for 50 years, despite the repeated attempts for a new model? That will be all. Thank you.
Pinar, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Minister, and your team for being here today. Thank you for the SABC to being here today. Colleagues, this is a tough situation. As somebody who strongly believes in free markets economics, the SABC will always struggle to compete within that industry. However, with that being said, I think it was said by our Minister that there's still a very important space for the SABC. There are millions of people out there who are struggling financially, who cannot afford the prescriptions and need to have access to entertainment and the correct information. I'm hopeful, Group CEO, that you're at the helm. I know you were recently appointed in November of 2023. So by now, I trust you've have a good hold on the system itself. And I know your history with MassSmart, with MTN, with SuperSport. I think you're a great addition to this team, and I hope you will steer the ship in the right direction. With that being said, I want you to, if possible, if you cannot answer them now, please indicate. You can reply in writing to me. To tell me a bit more about the strategic partnerships you've actually were able to and what value has that added to your system? And be as specific as you can, please. I think that's because I think that's going to be a huge role for the SABC going forward. The problem is, colleagues, someone with a cell phone and an internet connection create a program, a podcast, and it can be watched with millions of people, and that's always going to be very difficult to compete with that system for the SABC. So, have you considered, and if you have considered, tell me, please tell me more about it. Some of these strategic partnerships with individual podcasters, where maybe they can be aired on some of our channels. Is that something you're considering? And the podcast space is booming across the world. Me myself listen to it on a daily basis. So please, if you have more information on that. And about your staffing, you spoke about filling key positions within the top management. I think that's critical to have those key areas to ensure we are heading in the right direction with regards to mindset and growth and aspirations. But with regards to staff, is there not a sense that the SABC is overstaffed in other departments, or are you saying no? Listen, we are still shorting people. And then you spoke about competing with the other sectors like your Netflix and your MultiChoices and your multinational corporations, about regulation and over-regulation. And I want to make sure I got you correctly. Are you advocating for regulation of these industries, or you're advocating for deregulation of the SABC? Because personally, I will always fight for deregulation. I think that's the red tape, and I think that's maybe also what's holding you back as the group CEO. Because, as you said, you're struggling to compete with these guys because all these guys, like you said, need a connection and a bank account. So if you maybe can give me more insights on that, I think that's also critical for you to be able to compete on a level playing field. Chair, I have more questions, but I think I will submit them to writing, and I want to just maybe for the CFO. I was a bit concerned because one of the pages said the most significant immediate crisis or challenges is the financial crisis. So, CFO, I will send you a few questions in writing regarding the finances, and so you can take your time on that to reply in writing. Thank you, Chairperson. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Honourable Sithole.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good afternoon to the Minister and the Deputy Minister and the staff, including the CEO. I'm going to write my questions, but now what I wanted to raise here is that when I was growing up, there were these people that usually were going door to doors for the issues of license only. I don't see them anymore because I think that at that time it was actually working. And again, the issue of monitoring the shops that are selling selling TVs is very important also, because you might find that Selina Sithole, she's owning more than 20 TVs. It should be checked out because it's impossible for one person to own those numbers of TV. So I think that the monitoring side of it should be made and be taken very serious, because really some of the problems that the SABC find itself is because of lack of monitoring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Sithole. Honourable Modise.
Thank you so much, Chair, and good afternoon to the Minister and the team. Chair, mine is not necessarily a question, but rather, even concern is not a correct word. I don't know how to term it. Is it the group CEO or is that just the CEO? Group CEO. When she makes a presentation, the manner in which she's doing it, she's appealing to my inner me, you know. Yeah. And the appeal suggests that I must have my gun in my holster, you know, and be a human and listen to the plea that she's making. Because the presentation is more of a plea than a complaint. And the presentation, in my understanding, suggests that we're doing our best with the limitations that we have. As opposed to people who say, hey, you know, member farmers are supposed to do it, and so on and so on. So they know what they're doing, but they've got these limitations. And the cleverly way of the presentation, towards the end, she says, these are the things that we are requesting from you. If you were to assist us with the following, we promise you that next time we come here, SABC will be far better than where it is now. So how do you lambast that? How do you shoot that? You know, and therefore, hence I'm saying I don't really have questions except to say probably the ball is now in our court. They've made their presentation and they're leaving us with the problem now to say, as parliamentarians, as lawmakers, here are the problems that we have. How do you help us? And that's the message that I got from the presentation. It was precise. It was straight to the point. They understood what they're talking about. You can tell that they're not fishing. You know, they're clear. They understand what is happening. The only thing I want to check, CEO, you have an employee in SABC, and I hope it's not going to be what Vodacom and Makati are going through now. We have an employee at SABC. Fortunately, I'm one of those who listens to radio station, SABC radio stations. You find me on Ukozi, 3 to 6 afternoon if I'm in the car. Ozanabangan Bako, I'm there. You find me in the morning, you know, 6 to 9, Batukada and Twas and so. So I have an idea of what's happening in the radio stations. And when we say Ukozi is the biggest radio station, I will not debate that. It's a fact. One of your employees at Lesedi FM, I was listening to an interview, I think it was on SAFM, where he came up with an idea of your community radio awards. So he's launching them. I don't know when, but what is of concern for me is that I've not seen such such an interview on TV. The only time I heard it from the SABC platform was on SAFM, and I hope SAFM is on the SABC platform. From there, it's all commercial media that are running with the interview because apparently it's a groundbreaking idea. So I just want to check, is the SABC ever going to probably partner with your employee and go forward with him and be the one that advocates for him to be supported? Because what he's doing, I don't ever recall any radio awards for community radio stations. Awards mostly are for your mainstream and so on and so forth. And that's the only concern that I have. Is there a point where we're going to find the SABC running with this project? Because it's a beautiful project and it's an employee of SABC. So I don't think it will even cost money to have him on TV and interviewing him. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable Modise. Honourable CEO, the ball is in your court again from Honourable Modise. Honourable Kennedy.
Sorry. My questions are here for you to tap and look at them for your growth. And then there are the things that I just found out from the information that you give us and the pamphlets that you gave us. One of your main objectives is to reflect on the identity and diverse nature of South Africans, which must also reflect on their multilingual and diverse nature through their different languages. So the question is, did the SABC achieve this objective of covering all South African language in their broadcasting? The second question is in relation to this fact. Of the 19 radio stations, did you manage to reach out all diverse cultures of South Africa so that you grow in that? There's an issue of taking so long, whether it was 50 or whatever. Why did it take so long for SAB to realize that the funding model that they use doesn't work for you people, doesn't work for them? With the compliance level reaching up to 14%. The next question is, as you explained to us, advertising and TV license are two core primary revenue streams. With advertisers not coming on board, is there any mechanism of enticing them, the advertisers, to sell yourself to them? What steps did you prepare for advertisers to come on board to support you people? The last question is, you indicated that the new first-time TV buyers are not interested in paying for licenses. Again, are there strategies that you are thinking of to enforce them to pay for the licenses? And again, there's about 800,000 registered users. Are they complying in payments so that SAB grows and function well? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Kennedy. Honourable Farmer.
Thank you, Chairperson. I really do not have a question except to say that I would like to support Honourable Modise in what he was saying about the presentation and the way it has come across from the other side of the table. I do, however, have a concern, Chairperson, that we are asked, I think it's the very last slide before questions, to encourage government agencies and entities to support advertising opportunities with SABC. In light of the public mandate that they carry, we should not be asked for this. It should be standard coming with the public mandate that they have to carry as SABC. Other than that, I really do not have a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Machubeni, she's a new member to this committee. Welcome to you.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to you, greetings to the Minister and the colleagues. Even myself, Chair, I don't have a question. So far, I'm worried about this thing of ETV license. How can we fast track that thing? Because you'll find out each and every day we are buying TVs. But instead of it growing of money in SABC, instead it's low. Maybe there must be a mechanism, but how can we deal with this issue? We can't allow someone for example, I went to game and I bought my TV. Then someone asked me, sorry, Sissy, do you have a TV license? You know, so even myself, I give her my ID number to buy a TV. So it will mean that thing, let us have a mechanism. How can we fast track this thing so that everyone must have a TV license? Everyone must pay his TV license. Because there's a lot of debts, people who are not paying their TV license, but at the end of the day, they bought a TV license. So I'm just worried. I'm just concerned. I'm equal TV license. Ask send something. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. Honourable Mabilu?
No, thanks, Honourable Chair. Good afternoon, Minister and the team.
Sorry to interject.
Yeah,
Honourable Mabilu, you can ask 10 questions because very little questions have come out.
I'm just, okay, thanks, Chair. Oh, thanks, Chair. Look, in terms of unfortunately, the pages are not numbered. So for reference, it's difficult. So I'll start with the page. One question on the page that deals with context and challenges. You've got about 2, 4, 6 challenges that you are highlighting under that page. So through the Chair, Minister, I'll be interested in the last part on the funding model vis-a-vis the unilateral withdrawal of the SABC bill. Last year, it was a contentious issue at a public level. Minister, is there any intention, without getting into the merits and the demerits of the withdrawal, is there any plan to fast track the SABC bill that was withdrawn? Because the implications are quite clear that the funding model cannot be changed without changes in the enabling legislation, which was the bill. So that would be my first question. Secondly, coming from a province that is quite diverse, the largest province in the country, even larger than Germany, which is the Northern Cape, we've got indigenous languages spoken by the Kwe and the Sen. And we must commend SABC, Minister, for their radio. They've got radio station, their schools. The language is quite advanced and developed. My question would be to say now, are you having plans to ensure, in terms of community television, that they feature permanently there? I know it will bring in ICASA license, but coming from that province, that is one of the sticky problems that they say they don't see their languages on the public broadcaster except at the audio level. So that's a direct question. Obviously, Minister, not Minister, but the team, I'll be concerned, CEO, that I see your partnership at the national level and an international level. I don't have a problem with that. But you seem to be more inclined to work with the BBC and other media houses. But there's nothing on the coverage of more than 65,000 people being killed. Up to now, people are dying in the Middle East. In Palestine. So if you want to get any information, you must rely on Al Jazeera. And that is not part of your partnership that you are trying to bring to the fore. So I'm just asking, why do you limit yourself? Because it's a human rights issue and it's a global governance issue to say that we get minimal coverage around that. So that would be the question. The last two ones, Chair, will be around the deadline for analog, as given by the end of the month. Is the SABC going to meet the channel, the target? If not, what is going to be the implication? We know this matter has been running for many years. And then the last one will be around your local content. In terms of the local content, it seems you are not achieving your targets. Are there any means to ensure that you reach your targets? And I think the other 3 questions, I'll put them in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mubilo. Honourable van den Berg.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings, everyone. I do have a couple of questions. Let's start. If you refer to advertisement cost, are the IEC or other government entities, for instance, also paying for airtime or advertisements? One, and are you counting it as advertisement or grants? And what percentage of your advertising income comes from the public sector? Because that's also government money that flows into the SABC. I'd just like to get a hold on that one. Then I need to speak on the content. You know that the SABC definitely has got an ability to influence the critical mass and the acceptable narrative. Also, everybody loves a good story. We can use it for good. We can influence people in that way. I remember when LA Law, it was a SABC program, when LA Law was showcasing, everybody wanted to be a lawyer. Now, we also had Sex in the City, but that was also a couple of lawyers. It's not the same. Right now, so what I'm trying to say is that we have a problem in South Africa with, for instance, entrepreneurship. We have a problem with employment. Everybody wants to be a lawyer or everybody wants to be a manager. And we actually have a responsibility to our population to say to them, but you know, you can be proud of also being a plumber or an electrician and having a good story and showing a future potential market, how that could be, how little Sipu becomes a plumber and how he starts his own business and he gets a wife and you know, it will definitely have a positive impact on the narrative in our country and really I just needed to speak to that. Then regarding the content creators that are now streaming on platforms like, for instance, YouTube, is it perhaps possible to speak to those creators directly and also to acquire some of their content, since it might be something that's missed by the people that are not streaming? There might be good content for a very reasonable price. Just a thought. Then I cannot see government making a massive financial difference. We've all heard the budget today, but our minister has spoken about public-private enterprises, and it's as if he has given us a bit of a mandate to have a look at that. And you have spoken to the success of Netflix, etc. Could you perhaps, or have you perhaps had a look at that type of scenario? Then, given the legislation commitment you have to government, have you done scenarios and or financial modeling where you bring those regulations to an absolute minimum, for instance, where you can make it as small as possible, so that it's just also a question, given the declining TV license compliance, what alternative collection mechanisms have you been looking at? And then at the same time, I need to also admit that I have not been watching TV for the last 10 years. I am streaming and YouTube is my favorite. And I have a lot of very nice stories that I keep up to date there. But and I also don't own a TV anymore for the last 10 years. But have you ever tried cancelling your TV license? That is now a really difficult process to do. I still could not achieve cancelling mine. Thank you.
If I may come in here, Honourable van der Berg, you just have to pass away. Thank you very much, members. Honourable Minister, if I can hand over to your department, and once all the questions have been answered, if there are any follow-up questions, you're more than welcome. I don't want to go over time because I know everybody is tired. It's an afternoon meeting. I would like you to close off, Minister, with any closing remarks. So over to the department for your responses, please. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think just for process-wise, we'll let the DG deal with that question regarding the relationship with Treasury. I think it was asked by Honourable Dlamini Mokoena. My apologies, Honourable Mokoena. But from my view on that, I think it may also be useful for the committee to have a conversation with the Minister of Finance. Because it is a crucial stakeholder in terms of the resource allocation. But the DG will speak at a practical level in terms of some of the efforts that have been initiated to unlock resources from Treasury for the help of the SABC. And then the SABC will deal with the questions. I will then deal with the political questions that were directed to me at the end. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister, and a very good afternoon, Honourable Chair and Honourable members, and to the SABC team. Maybe just to quickly touch on that and also the issue related to cell phone creation and content as far as the audio and audiovisual policy that we're doing as a department. On the issue of the relationship with National Treasury, you're quite correct, Honourable Mokoena. It is a tenuous relationship. We do make request and application for the SABC. When we made the application for the 3.2 billion bailout, that was not the original amount, so it was sized down. And it is very difficult when you have then presented a strategy and a plan, and then you only get a portion of the amount that you've requested. So, and that the expectation is that you must deliver on the full plan. That's always our relationship with them on all the programs that we have, whether it's about the SA Connect in the country, and as well as for the SABC and other critical stakeholders like the ICASA, our regulator. So when we made that request for the bailout, we wanted the entire suit, and we got an arm sleeve of the shirt, and we had to make do, and that's why we were leveraging in as far as the creative and looking at partnerships, etc., which we are working on and yielding results. But it is also then affected by the fact what we've also shown to you with regards to the bottom line. So the SABC does not have, obviously, when anyone wants to partner with them, they will say, show me your books, and if you are not looking healthy, then they walk away. So it's been very difficult to clinch those partnerships and to solidify them. We make requests on a biannual. Obviously, we're looking at the midterm, and then we also look for the E&E, and unfortunately, we have not received any even now. And as such, as the department, we've had to be creative to look at alternatives. So they still fund, for example, a portion, not even the public mandate, but a portion with regards to what they consider local content, which is then the Africa channel. But we've had to then try to readjust that and put it for other needs as well. We've also then gone further, and I want to talk to the issue that was being proposed both by the SABC, and I assume it is supported by the House, that says that can we then look at exemptions for the SABC? SABC right now, it's very difficult for them to compete with other broadcasters. They have to adhere to the PFMA and all the other regulations in terms of three quotations. Honourable Van der Berg, you said your famous or your favorite channel was the law, and obviously law is provided by a particular entity. So you can't just say now I'm looking for 3 quotations because you're going to get law and someone else doing a cooking channel and something else. So it doesn't make sense. We did make an application for the exemption, and we are going to make another. Now we're going to look at a multi-year application for the exemption in terms of PFMA in order for them to be able to go out and compete. Then on the issue with regards to the issue of the creative industry, it is quite correct that there's genius around that. But we also need to give credit to the SABC that in terms of local content in South Africa, they're basically participating or contributing to 90% of that in both radio as well as television. So we give them that credit. And then we're also looking now in terms of our audio and audiovisual, and I think the minister touched on that, and I'm sure he's going to elaborate even further, to then say, how then do we make sure that as much as we also on the one side, stimulating local content and supporting the entrepreneurs and booing people who are providing the content, at the same time assist therefore the platforms on the offset of it, because when you start a new channel, you're not going to get viewership and eyeballs immediately, but it grows over time because of their fascination with it. But in the meantime, how then do we offset that risk for the SABC by us then funding it as from the local content perspective? And this is carried in the audio and audiovisual white paper, which will soon be finalizing and then tabling to yourselves. Minister, those were the 2 issues that you asked me to respond on. Thank you.
SABC.
Thanks, Minister, Chairperson, honorable members. I just cover general issues insofar as especially regulation. I think there was a question from Honorable Pina insofar as considering podcasters. That sector is not regulated, I'll put it that way, and they are not regulated in the sense that they can speak anyhow. SABC is governed by the Electronic Communications Act, is governed by the BCCSA rules. We have, at least on SAFM, one person that is on radio but also has his own podcast. His content is clean. So that is possible wherein the person is aligned within the work of the SABC. And then you also spoke about the issue of over-regulation or regulation. As far as the SABC, we're talking about regulatory parity, right? So parity does not necessarily mean the same, but look at it this way. SABC is one entity in South Africa that is expected to cover all languages. That does not come cheap, and people pick and choose. You will find most issues that you see on on TV, even on radio, is mostly in English, isn't it? So that costs money. So we're saying, insofar as regulation, whatever you do as the legislature, as the regulator, ensure that the playing field is even for everyone, and so that the SABC is not burdened with issues that are over and above. Because if you look at it this way, no one is going to cover news that is happening in the rural areas except it is something so controversial, but the SABC is expected to be there. That is part of their license conditions with ICASA, hence the whole talk about public mandate. So in this regard, we're saying regulatory parity, and we have put proposals to ICASA in this regard, and it's also linked to the issues around the sports of national interest as well, that insofar as the SABC, if you're looking at sport, because we are a free-to-air, and I'll use that because no one pays a fee to watch us, like a subscription fee. Even in the case that said somebody watches YouTube, you still pay a fee there. It's not really for free. So SABC in itself, we are saying those kind of sports don't, as PSL, do not sell free-to-air rights to a subscription service, isn't it? Because there are only in South Africa, if you look at it, there's only 2 free-to-air services. It's eMedia, which is ETV, and the SABC. Why is it being sold to MultiChoice? So those are the things that we're looking at. And I think also, Honorable Stole, the issue of door-to-door, SABC dispensed of it many, many years ago for reasons that have varied. Some of the reasons coupled with most people stay in gated estates, and also there are people that are pretending to be working for the SABC, and it was not yielding any results. So you come to somebody's home, like you go there, you say, sir, and the person says, no, I'm just a gardener. This is not my house. And it costs more for the SABC to run those kind of programs without yielding any result. But the SABC, I must add, has come up with I don't want to say debt collectors. What are they called? Collection agencies. Collection agencies. I know what to say. Collection agencies. Collection agencies are able to collect. They'll send you an SMS and they'll be saying you are owing SABC X amount of money and pay them. But because you've accumulated a debt, there will be an extra fee that they are charging you in a case wherein there is a successful collection. But we need to concede, as you saw in the presentation, that our collection is not where it's supposed to be, because there's more TVs than there are people that are paying for TV licenses. And then I'll say, I noted the other ones insofar as the community TV question. Yes, the coverage. SABC does not play in the community TV space. However, we do assist wherein there's a requirement through the MDDA. So MDDA will be the one that is running those kind of programs. Let's say in Northern Cape, there's a requirement. ICASA has issued a license, an invitation to apply for people to have a community TV station. And then there is a feasible case for that part of the Northern Cape. Then the SABC will be requested to partner, because no one is willing to go to the Northern Cape, let us be honest, except the SABC. No one is going to come and say, let us assist in so far as the language of languages that are even not in the Constitution. So there are those kind of things that SABC does. There was the issue about the radio awards. I think that's more of an operational question, but we do know that in South Africa, there are a number of awards that are being run. One of them I can think on top of my head, Telkom Awards. They have different categories, including community radio awards. So insofar as the question was, insofar as the person coming up with the idea of the community radio awards, that is solely, and I don't know who the person is, the Lisedi person, the person was on Lisedi. It will depend on the contract that they have with the SABC. If they're an independent contractor, right, then those, whatever accrues from that will be that person's responsibility. We have independent contractors. If the person is an employee of the SABC, there are internal processes as to how SABC has so many processes that it's not that person, by the time he appeared on radio, would have satisfied. So it's something that I think operationally they'll be looking at. I think that the minister responded on analog switch out local content quotas. SABC, I was like, actually meets the local content quotas. It actually exceeds them. ICASA's reports actually confirms that we meet the local content quotas. However, it does not mean, Chair, honorable members, that people do not complain. I know, for instance, let's say we think of RSG, people will complain that although there's RSG, people still speak English, so people still complain that the presenters mix a bit of English, therefore it's not pure language, and that is the reality. As a result, one of the, and especially, and I'm making the example of RSG, because RSG is one of, although it's smaller, it's one of those radio stations that it's able to combine both radio and written form. They'll bring in authors to come in to expand the Afrikaans language. And I think it's that and Lisedi in the main. It's those two radio stations that are doing that. But people will still complain. If I go there and I speak English because Vietnamese Afrikaans, they will still complain and say, I did not speak Afrikaans. But as far as the CASA, we exceed the quotas. And CEO, I'm going to leave you with the question around advertising, you know that is not my area.
Thank you so much, DC, for that. I think you really covered the majority of the questions. And those honorable members that we maybe don't give you the sufficient answers, we can always come back, as you said, Chair, you know, in terms of a written response. But from an advertising perspective, the question I think that came from Honorable Kennedy was how do we, for example, entice advertisers? That is the core business of SABC, actually, you know, in terms of, because 83% of our revenue comes from advertising and sponsorship. So that is the core business of SABC, but unfortunately, it is the most contested revenue stream amongst all of us. So how we all compete is the strength of our sales teams, the strength of our value propositions, the strength of our trade marketing, the strength of our pricing, you know, in terms of those rate cards that we go to market with, how much we charge per 30 seconds for a spot on scheme sum, etc. So that is something that we, you know, that is the core of our business. Can we improve? Yes. You know, we always say that when it comes to sales enablement, agility, our systems, we're still a bit archaic because there's a lot of manual, you know, inputs that SABC has to do, unlike our competitors who, from an infrastructure program perspective, are way ahead of us. So, and it's something that, you know, the CFO can also add if he'd like to, but we're introducing, for example, a new booking system that we're bringing in that that will enable us to compete and optimize a bit better and have more automation around that. So we are very, very strong in that, but we believe we can improve because we believe our competitors are more commercially savvy than the SABC when it comes to that. And then the issue of language in terms of, do we reach all South Africans? I think you spoke to that, you know, it's that will always be a contentious issue, but I must say, as SABC, we welcome it because our platforms are meant precisely to have such debates. That's what they exist for, to say, am I being represented and what are you doing about it? And I'm glad that the members know about our, you know, 18th radio station in the Northern Cape, because that's quite important. I think a lot of these have been answered, the local content, TV license in terms of mechanisms. You know, I was talking to the minister and I said, we're coming up with innovative ways of trying to collect TV license, but I always say the TV license issue in South Africa has a culture of non-payment. Let's be honest, how many people actually pay for their traffic fines? Unless they are stopped at a roadblock and are being arrested. You know, so we do have that culture of non-payment that also impedes the ability of people to pay. Like I said, in the UK, people pay. They've got an adherence rate of more than 80%. Ours is the reverse, you know. So it's a historic thing of non-payment. And the worst part is that the younger the person, the more they're not going to pay for it. And those are the people buying TVs, you know, if you think about it. So it means that we have to think differently about the licensing regime, hence the funding model, you know, innovation that is required. But also in the interim, then how does SABC try as much as possible to collect what they can with the existing, you know, payment base, and also try and hold, let's say, retailers to account, whereby, because TVs are sold somewhere, you know. So how do we ensure that retailers are held to account, to your point, and not saying, please give me your ID number or phoning your brother and he's got 20 TVs. But the good news is that we've curtailed the amount of TVs one person can own. So if you're a billionaire and you've got 15 houses, you've got a problem on your hands. Your wife or, you know, somebody else has to have a TV license, because we've curtailed it. I think it's now you're allowed up to 5 TVs because it was open-ended before. So that will assist us to actually ensure that we don't have, to your point, Honourable Member, people owning too many TVs. So I think DC, we've answered most of the questions in terms of, and if we haven't, Honourable Chair, you can let us know. Oh, the question about the payment, how much money are we making from the public sector as a percentage of our revenue? It's actually 4% of our advertising revenue comes from the public sector across all levels of government. So the majority of our money comes from the private sector. And hence we are saying we have to compete with everybody else. The private sector is not interested in our story. They want the audiences, they want the content, they want the relevance, and that's how we compete. But at the moment, for the year ending, the full year last year, we made 142 million rand from government. Government spends far more than that amount on advertising. I think, back to you, Minister.
Thanks very much. I think two things. One is, one of the key takeaways from here, when you look at the non-compliance that's been alluded with TV licenses, is that does not indicate a drop in TV sales. So the sales for TVs are going on, right? And that is not translating into TVs. And that is where perhaps the gap is, and we need to think creatively about and involving everyone in the value chain. The limitation of a number of TV sets per individual has gone as far as it could have. There is actually criminality and fraud in the process that happens. But I think there is another element, and I'm surprised the CEO didn't speak about this, because she never misses an opportunity to advocate for it, which is the SABC Plus app. Because the consumption of TV services for convenient purposes has moved to our fingertips, be it with our cell phones and our apps. And I think even for members of the portfolio, not of the select committee, we would advocate that you get on that app. But for me, as I was whispering to you, was that the growth of that app itself also represents a potential source of revenue. And we need to think creatively about how we leverage that. So get on that app before it costs you money to have the app. And just also on the challenges, I think what the SABC is reflecting here, colleagues, is that there is a requirement in terms of what the public mandate is. But the funding of that public mandate does not match the demand. Right? And secondly, what they are saying is, because of being a public broadcaster, they're not necessarily saying they are entitled to 100% government spending in terms of government budgeting, but they're saying in your interactions with other entities of the state, where you can help is in establishing how much actually they are spending on the public broadcaster, and even beyond the public broadcaster, even with community media. Because for us at the department, that is also an important medium of communication. Because at a household level, those are the very basic things that can help at a resource-wise in terms of the SABC becoming, getting a fair access of the parity that even the deputy chairperson was speaking about. In terms of the ASO deadline, the deadline is for the 30th of March, as is. There is a legal challenge that has been brought up by e-media. I think the first hearing is set for the 18th to the 19th. From our side, we'll obviously be watching what, how that matter unfolds. Yeah, we'll always be able to come back here and account to the portfolio, to the committee in terms of how that process unfolds. We don't know what the outcome is, but the deadline, as I said in the opening remarks, is that across the board in government, there is a scramble for very limited resources, and those resources have also impacted the analog signal in the form of the deadline that was imposed on us to work with. And just lastly, in terms of the agencies, I think everyone across the board is trying to best find the most precise way of resolving this issue about what is the sustainable model for the SABC in this environment that we are in, right? Where there is new entrants in media, where there's competition with audio and visual media services that are in the space, and with an entity that is modernizing itself to capture young, fresh audiences that will be able to comply. The weakness of the TV license model is you don't lose access to TV if you don't lose access to, the SABC's product if you don't pay your TV license, because you can't be switched off, right? Whereas with other instruments, if it's your motor vehicle license, for instance, and it's gone over the date, the traffic cops will stop you and you'll be in trouble. So there's no disincentive actually in the instruments of the law for doing that. And we rely on the good conscience of South Africans to pay their TV license. And that's where I think the weakness is. And even as I grapple with this myself, I don't know how you can make it so appropriate that people lose access to something because they're supposed to pay for it. Because unfortunately, we don't value things if we don't lose them. We don't, and that's the challenge that we're playing in. And just lastly on the bill, so the process of that bill is now at cabinet, and that will guide how we move forward with the bill. And whatever cabinet decides, I'm sure we'll be able to abide by the outcome of that, and it will hopefully close, this chapter about the outcry that you referenced regarding the withdrawal of the SABC bill. Chairperson, the other questions we commit that as soon as we get them in writing, we will abide by that timeline that you gave us in order to supply the written responses. In the unlikely event that we run the risk of not meeting with that deadline, we'll communicate with your office in time. But definitely the written responses will be supplied the sooner we get the written questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I see there was a hand up from Honourable Mundise. I think that's a follow-up question. Any other questions from the members, and were all your questions answered? Is everybody happy? Okay, Honourable Mundise.
No, thanks, Chair. I don't know what is happening with the team today. Or is it because I went to church this morning? I don't know. For some reasons, they're talking to me, and I'm sitting here. And I'm haunted by what was said by the CEO of Nokia when the CEO was addressing the staff for the very last time before Microsoft took over. And he said something like, we didn't do anything wrong, but the mistake is that we didn't change as the world was changing. And I'm scared that if we don't do something, SABC will fold. And I'm happy that the minister speaks about the car license, your driver's license. At a particular time, it expires. And if you continue using it knowing that it is expired, you know that you are taking a risk. You get stopped at a traffic light, you must now come up with stories. Do you know who I am? Yeah, but what I want to suggest, Chair, through this select committee, and probably with the portfolio committee chaired by Member Diko, is that probably throw up in an itinerary for all committees of Parliament. And from the budgets of committees, there must be a dedicated budget that goes to the SABC. That committees, at least once a month, as a chair of a portfolio committee or select committee, you go to SABC. And then you go and relay what is it that you have done for a month of April. And so at least, if, let's say for argument's sake, if every committee could pay 100,000 towards SABC for this type of feedbacks and all of that, securing a particular slot on SABC, because I want to believe in every province, there would be SABC somewhere. If you go to Northern Cape, you'll find SABC. You go to the Free State, there will be SABC, and so on and so forth. So that even if you do an oversight, there will be SABC somewhere that can come and cover what you are doing. Because if we, as Parliament, don't support SABC, how are we expecting someone else to come and support SABC? Let it start here with us, and then everyone else will follow. Thanks, Chair.
Honourable Modise, thank you very much for that. I think it's something that you, Minister, can look into, you and your department. I saw the lady in red, sorry, I forgot her name, saying thank you very much, but hopefully it doesn't come off my salary. If that is the case, I'm going to point to you. Going through the presentation, Minister, Honourable Modise also referred to solutions. I do see you working towards solutions. with regard to the TV license, looking at things like the municipal bill, etc., and those are things that can be looked into to see if it is viable, because I feel the same as you. If you transgress, then you should be held to account. So let's hope something comes from this, and that you take Honourable Modise's comments seriously and speak to the powers that be to see how we can address it as well. Honourable Minister, can I ask you for the closing comments, unless there's something from the floor? Thank you very much.
Honourable Chairperson, nothing much. I thought the responses were also the closing remarks. I just don't want to keep the committee for the sake of talking. Thank you very much.
Spoken like a true Democrat. Thank you very much. The meeting is therefore adjourned. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot. I was so happy about the democracy taking the stand here. We still have minutes, members, but the minister and his contingency may be excused. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Accept.
Honourable Palmer, here with the proposed adoption of the minutes, Chair.
Second.
What was that? I couldn't hear you. I was listening to Mwadia.
Honourable Palmer proposed adoption of the minutes, Chair.
Can I have a seconder, please? No, to be serious and conscientious, could I ask, has everybody gone through the minutes? Can I then ask for a mover of the minutes?
Chairperson, I officially move for the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you very much, Honourable Farmer. I saw Honourable Modise's hand up. I take it he would like to second.
I'm seconding, Chair. Thank you.
Are there any matters arising from the minutes? None. Now I officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you.